They called it the Vindicator. A Terran warship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Long, jagged, black as sin, with scars etched into its hull from battles it never lost. No empire had ever captured it. No admiral had ever dared approach it without praying first. And when it appeared on the edge of the Zalari Dominion's home system, they laughed. Until it started killing. Captain Dren, supreme warlord of the Zalari Dominion, watched in silence as fleet after fleet disappeared from the screen. His command center reeked of desperation masked as pride. His aides whispered nonsense, words like glitch, malfunction, covert tactics. Lies. They didn't know what they were facing. But he knew. He'd heard the stories. Every corner of the galaxy had. They whispered about humanity in dark cantinas and under ruined moons. About a species that didn't evolve, they adapted. About soldiers who didn't retreat, they resurrected. And about warships, black Terran warships, that fought like wounded gods and never left survivors. The Dominion had laughed at those stories. Primitive humans with their short lifespans and obsession with war. They thought Earth was a minor world, an ant nest, easy to crush. They made one mistake. They gave Earth a reason to fight. It started with a border dispute. A Zalari patrol ship destroyed a Terran mining colony. 5,000 dead. Civilians, no military presence, just workers, families, children. The Dominion claimed it was an accident, a navigational error. Earth didn't file complaints. It didn't send diplomats. It sent the Vindicator. And now, in orbit above Zealer Prime, it hovered, alone, facing an entire armada. Glowing faint red from the thousands of atmospheric burns and plasma deflections. Its weapons were silent, for now. But everyone knew what came next. Inside the Vindicator, Commander Marcus Rhine stood at the helm, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the carnage they had already caused. He wasn't young anymore, graying at the sides, scars along his neck, knuckles cracked and calloused from too many fights that never made it into official reports. He wasn't here for glory. He wasn't even here for revenge. He was here to finish the job. "Status?" he barked. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Miles, a hardened brute with a voice like sandpaper, grunted. "Dominion lost 312 ships, no survivors. They're still sending more. We're reading 7 carrier class, 25 destroyers, and, hell, 2 world breakers." Marcus didn't flinch. "Bring us closer." Miles turned slowly, one brow raised. "Sir, we're in range already." "I said closer." The bridge fell into tense silence. Everyone on board had already accepted the truth weeks ago. This was a suicide mission. Earth hadn't asked for survivors. It asked for a message. Marcus was that message. He leaned forward toward the comm panel, switching to open channel. "This is Commander Marcus Rhine of the Terran vessel Vindicator. To the Zalari Dominion. You bombed a civilian colony. You murdered families. You thought you were making a point. Now it's my turn." He cut the line. Then he gave the order. "All guns, fire." The ship roared. It didn't just fire missiles. It spoke in hellfire. Lances of red fury carved through the Dominion ships like a scalpel through flesh. The shields barely held a second. The first worldbreaker cracked apart before it could even charge its core. The second turned to flee. But too late. A payload of planet-killer warheads rammed into its flank, splitting it open like rotten fruit. Zealer Prime's skies turned red, not from fire, but from the reflection of every burning ship. Inside the Dominion Palace, Dren fell to his knees, the screams of his empire echoing from 1,000 channels. He finally understood. They had awakened something old, something human, and it didn't forgive. The wreckage floated like grave markers, a field of twisted metal and shattered dreams orbiting what used to be the crown jewel of the Zalari Dominion. Zalur Prime, once the capital of 1,000 conquered worlds, now lay beneath a sky smeared in red and ash. Its orbital fleet reduced to nothing more than molten debris. Inside the Vindicator, the crew stood in silence, not out of pride, not even shock. They were soldiers of Earth. Pride was for the living, and shock was for those who didn't know what they were capable of. Commander Marcus Rhine didn't speak for a long time. He just watched the carnage unfold on the main screen. His reflection glared back at him from the shattered hull of a Zalari carrier still spinning, its engines flickering with dying plasma. A few escape pods floated out. He let them go. Not out of mercy. He wanted survivors, witnesses, someone to carry the story back to the rest of the galaxy. He finally turned toward Miles. "Status." Miles wiped blood off his brow. Not his own, just shrapnel from a secondary system blowout 2 decks down. His voice was low, controlled, like a man trying not to feel the weight of the bodies he'd just helped kill. "We're reading a wide-scale system retreat. Dominion forces are pulling back to Sector 6. Local defenses on Zalur Prime are scrambling, but their planetary cannons are offline. Looks like we hit their uplink tower during the last volley. They're blind." Marcus nodded. "And casualties?" Miles looked at the floor for a second. "Us. 17. Mostly lower decks. Hull breach near Reactor 2. We sealed it, but medbay's full." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Get those families flagged. Next of kin, all of them. Don't let Earth bureaucrats bury their names in some damn folder." "Aye, sir." Marcus walked to the observation window, even though he didn't need to. The view screens gave him a better tactical view. But something about looking at it with your own eyes, it made the destruction feel earned. "You think they're done?" Miles asked from behind him. "No," Marcus said. "They're just scared. That's different." Miles smirked. "Could have fooled me. We just took out an entire defensive grid. I haven't seen a kill count like that since Mars." Marcus didn't smile. His eyes were hard, distant. "And look what it cost us. Half the Terran fleet. 6 colonies abandoned. A war that should have ended 3 years ago." He turned. "This isn't victory, Miles. This is the invoice." Down on Zalur Prime, chaos reigned. The Imperial Palace, built into the mountain face of the capital's highest peak, groaned under the weight of its own failure. Elite guards once bred to crush insurgencies and public uprisings now stood huddled in hallways, their rifles gripped like toys. The smell of burnt plastic and electrical fire hung in the air. Supreme Warlord Dren wasn't wearing his ceremonial armor anymore. He sat in a command chair that no longer gave orders to anything. He stared at a flickering hollow map filled with red X's. Ships, outposts, defense stations, all gone. His aides had stopped talking hours ago. The ministers had all fled, cowards, traitors, or corpses by now. He hadn't eaten, he hadn't slept. And yet something deep inside him still clung to the idea that this couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not to the Dominion. They'd ruled this quadrant for over 400 cycles. They had enslaved races, harvested planets, turned suns into energy farms. They had everything. Everything except a warship like that. "What are they?" he muttered to no one. The only answer came from his military strategist, General Fathar, one of the few who hadn't fled. "They're Terrans," Fathar said, barely above a whisper. "But not like the others we've fought. This one's different. Older. Smarter. It knows what we fear." Dren's voice trembled for the first time. "They were nothing. Just another animal species with guns." "No," Fathar said, staring at the wreckage outside the shattered dome. "They're not animals. They're revenants. They don't fight to win. They fight because you gave them a reason." Back on the Vindicator, Marcus was staring at the mission clock. They had 28 hours left in orbit. That's all Command authorized. A display of force, they'd said. Break the back of the Dominion. Show the galaxy we bite when provoked. But Marcus knew better. 28 hours wasn't a warning. It was a leash. He turned to his ship's AI core, an old unit named Grim, known for having fewer protocols and more teeth than any civilian model. "Grim," Marcus said. "I want a scan of every city on this hemisphere. Prioritize military installations, black sites, and known execution camps." Grim responded with its usual gravelly hum. "Scanning. 5 seconds. You're going to want to see this, Commander." The screen lit up with points of interest. There were over 50 camps, detention centers, forced labor compounds, experimentation labs, all operational, all shielded beneath civilian infrastructure. Miles frowned. "They're hiding their war crimes behind hospitals and schools." Marcus didn't even blink. "Of course they are." He tapped the screen. "Start targeting uplinks and command structures. We'll feed coordinates to resistance cells." Miles raised a brow. "Resistance?" Marcus gave a half nod. "They're still down there. The Dominion crushed rebellions, but not completely. There's always someone left. Someone angry, someone scared. They just needed proof the Empire could bleed." "You're giving them a match. I'm giving them justice." Later that evening, Marcus found himself alone in the quarters once used by the ship's original admiral. Long dead now. He didn't bother turning on the lights. The stars outside gave enough illumination, painting the room in silver blue. He sat with a small black box in his hands. He hadn't opened it in months. Inside were photos. A woman and a boy. His wife, his son, dead. Killed in the colony bombing. He wasn't supposed to be here. Earth Command had grounded him, called him unstable, too angry, too personal. But then the Vindicator needed a new commander, and the kind of person it needed was the kind of person who didn't care about orders anymore. He touched the corner of the photo, jaw clenched. "I told them," he whispered, voice shaking for the first time. "You don't touch my family." His comm pinged. "Commander," came Miles' voice, quieter than usual. "Dominion just sent a long-range broadcast. They're calling for a ceasefire. They're offering surrender." Marcus looked at the photo once more, then closed the box. He stood. "Surrender's not accepted." The next morning, the galaxy watched as a Terran warship launched encrypted data packets across every known communication grid. Videos, images, files from the Dominion's darkest programs. Human colonies ravaged, prisoners mutilated, children experimented on. Proof. The kind the galaxy couldn't ignore. Empires that had once stood beside the Dominion now recoiled. Trade partners severed ties. Neutral factions issued condemnations. Protesters took to streets across the quadrant. But none of it mattered to Marcus. He wasn't here to win a PR war. He was here to make sure no empire ever tried this again. On the second night, the Vindicator dropped its shields, not out of confidence, out of defiance. The Dominion, watching from their broken throne, saw it as arrogance, a trap, a message, and they couldn't resist. A final attack fleet launched from deep orbit, coordinated under the last loyal general they had. 80 ships, all they had left. Miles reported it as soon as the sensors lit up. "They're coming," he said. "Everything they've got left." Marcus nodded. "Good." Miles narrowed his eyes. "We're not going to power up the shields." Marcus stepped onto the bridge and stared straight ahead at the incoming fleet. "No." He tapped the comm. "All hands. Battle stations. Fire when ready." The final battle didn't last an hour. The Vindicator didn't move. It simply opened its internal vaults. Experimental Weaponry Earth Command had never approved for field use. Sun piercers, quantum hooks, singularity blades. The galaxy didn't even know the words yet. Ship after ship screamed into the void, split open by weapons they couldn't understand, let alone defend against. It was more than slaughter, it was revelation. When it ended, the Zalari Dominion didn't just surrender, they collapsed. Within days, resistance cells rose on every planet. Governors were dragged from palaces, statues were torn down, families of Terran colonists, once exiled and hunted, were given their homes back, if they were still alive. And the Vindicator? It left, without a word. It didn't wait for praise or parades. It didn't return to Earth. It didn't even acknowledge the collapse it had caused. It simply disappeared into deep space, leaving behind only stories. Stories of a ship that bled black fire, of a commander with nothing to lose, and a warning carved into the stars. No empire survives a Terran warship. The galaxy was quieter now. Not peaceful. Just quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a monster dies, but before the vultures arrive. Systems once owned by the Zalari Dominion floated in a vacuum of power, their leaders gone, their armies crushed. Their flags burned or buried beneath rubble. But nobody stepped in to claim what remained. Not yet. Everyone had seen what the Vindicator did, and no one wanted to be next. For 7 days, the warship was a ghost. No signals, no transmissions. It went dark after the last Dominion ship fell. Some thought it had self-destructed, its mission complete. Others believed it returned to Earth to be decommissioned or buried under bureaucracy. They were wrong. The Vindicator was still alive. It was hunting. In a nameless sector on the edge of the former Dominion borders, Commander Marcus Rhine sat in the observation deck of his ship, staring out into the abyss. Not the pretty kind of space people dreamed about. This was the edge. Cold, black, dead. Just like him. He hadn't spoken to Earth Command in weeks. They stopped sending messages after the 4th request denied was met with silence. He knew they were pissed. He'd defied orders, gone too far, crossed lines even Earth didn't want crossed, but they weren't going to court-martial him. Not because they respected him, but because they feared what he might do next. He still had the ship. He still had the crew. And worst of all, he still had a reason. Miles walked in, dropping a data slate on the table. We found him. Marcus didn't look up. How sure are we? 99%. Facial match confirmed by Grimm. Cross-checked with 2 intelligence leaks from ex-Dominion systems. He's hiding on Vorsk. Marcus finally moved. A twitch in the jaw. A flicker of something behind the eyes. Dr. Hallex. The man who designed the biological purge that killed Marcus's wife and son. Yeah, Miles said. That bastard. Vorsk wasn't a Dominion planet anymore. It had never officially been one. Just a research world. Off the books. They used it for deniable experiments, unsanctioned weapons, and ghosts like Hallex. It had no central government. No defenses. Just silence. Exactly the kind of place monsters ran to when their empire burned. The Vindicator dropped into orbit unannounced. There were no defense grids to alert, no fleets to challenge them. The only thing waiting below was snow, mountains, and a compound hidden in the rocks. Marcus didn't issue warnings. He didn't send scouts. He suited up. The landing was brutal. Wind howled across the cliffside like the screams of the dead. Snow battered their dropship as it pierced the atmosphere, engines shrieking in protest. Miles sat across from Marcus. Rifle in hand, checking gear with the calm of a man who'd done this too many times. You sure you don't want backup? He asked. Marcus shook his head. Too slow. He'll run. They weren't there for a siege. This wasn't a battlefield. This was a hunt. The ramp hissed open, and the cold hit them like a punch. They moved fast, silent, weapons drawn. The compound was almost invisible, carved into the stone, hidden behind an avalanche trigger array. But Grimm had already hacked it. As they approached, the doors groaned open on rusted tracks. Inside was a graveyard, old labs, broken equipment, dried blood. It had been abandoned in a hurry. But not everyone had escaped. They found Hallex on the lower levels, sealed behind an emergency vault with no oxygen flow. He'd locked himself in when the sensors picked up the Vindicator. Marcus stepped through the final door alone, leaving Miles at the corridor. Hallex sat in a chair, gaunt, pale, old, a shadow of the proud Dominion scientist he used to be. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I knew you'd come." Marcus didn't answer. Hallex gave a wheezing laugh. "You killed everything, burned it all down, and for what? Revenge? You think that brings them back?" Marcus stepped forward. "No." "Then why?" He didn't speak for a moment. Then, slowly, he drew a small object from his jacket. A photo. His wife and son. The last thing they ever gave him that mattered. "I want you to see what you destroyed before you die." Hallex stared at the photo. Then Marcus pulled the trigger. One shot. Clean, no glory, no last words. Just the end of a man who made genocide look like science. They didn't stay long on Vorsk. There was nothing left to take. Nothing worth remembering. As they flew back up to orbit, Miles glanced at Marcus. "You think this changes anything?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, watching the white planet fade behind them. "No," he said finally. "But I slept better last night knowing I'd kill him." The next weeks blurred into something strange. Marcus stopped checking logs. The crew stopped asking for orders. They drifted. Not aimlessly. There was still purpose, still fire. But they weren't soldiers anymore. They weren't even Terran representatives. They were something else. Every system they entered, they left different. Pirate kings vanished. Slavers disappeared. Collaborators turned up with holes in their heads, and Dominion tattoos burned off. Whispers followed them like smoke. They weren't a ship anymore. They were a reckoning. Earth Command finally caved, not with praise, not with medals, with fear. A message arrived, formal and cold. "Commander Marcus Rhine, you are hereby recalled to Earth for debriefing. Your current operations exceed mission parameters. Stand down or be marked rogue." Marcus didn't answer. He handed the message to Grimm. "Broadcast that to every former Dominion world." Grimm paused. "Unedited?" "Unedited. Let them see Earth blink." The response from the systems was instant. Protests in Earth's capital. Support for the Vindicator from rebel worlds, ex-prisoners, even human colonies Earth had long abandoned. They didn't want Marcus to stop. They wanted him to finish. But Marcus knew this couldn't last. Even legends have limits. One night, if it could be called night in space, he stood alone on the forward deck, eyes distant, hands behind his back. Miles joined him, quiet. "They'll come for us," Marcus nodded. "I know." "What are we going to do?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Make them understand why we never should have been needed in the first place." Because this was never about revenge anymore. It was about truth. About the lie the galaxy told itself. That humans were weak, that they were young, that they were just another species to be ruled. Marcus had buried that lie under starships and blood. And if the galaxy wanted to forget again, then he'd remind them. There were two kinds of betrayal. The first came with knives and blood and screaming. The second came quiet. With orders, with signatures. With people you once fought beside calling you a problem to be handled. And Marcus Rhine was about to face both. The message came through at Oro 600 ship time. a high-priority encrypted directive from Earth Command, routed through every surviving Terran relay station still loyal to the central government. It wasn't a warning. It was a death sentence. To Vindicator AI Core, Marcus Rhine, Commander. From Terran High Command. Subject: Cease Operation Authority. Revoked. You are hereby designated as a rogue commander. Your actions, while effective, are no longer aligned with Terran diplomatic objectives. You are ordered to power down the Vindicator, await retrieval by Fleet Marshal Davrin, and submit to full psychological evaluation and debrief. Failure to comply will result in Vindicator being classified as a hostile vessel and engaged accordingly. This is your final notice. Miles was the first to read it on the bridge. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what Earth had just said. They weren't thanking Marcus for breaking the back of the Dominion. They weren't honoring his sacrifice. They were silencing him. Marcus entered a few minutes later, dressed in his standard black tactical armor, jaw set like stone. He read the message once. Just once. Then handed the tablet back. "They're sending Davrin?" Miles nodded. "Him and the 9th Fleet." Marcus gave a humorless smile. "Fleet Marshal Davrin's an arrogant bastard. He'll come in loud, make a show of it." "We're talking 30 warships, sir," Miles said carefully. "Flagship's probably the Tyrant's Grace. Same class as us. They won't be bluffing." "Let them come," Marcus said. In Earth's high orbit, the 9th Fleet assembled. 30 Terran warships, all freshly refitted. Some still had launch ceremony paint on their hulls. The media followed their deployment with excited speculation. The networks didn't call it a hunt. They called it a disciplinary retrieval. But every soldier in the 9th knew the truth. They were going to war against one of their own. Fleet Marshal Davrin stood aboard the Tyrant's Grace, chin high, medals polished to the point of absurdity. He'd never liked Rhine. Saw him as unstable, dangerous, a relic of the brutal old Terran wars that Earth pretended to regret now. Davrin believed in order. Rhine believed in justice. And that made him a liability. Meanwhile, out in a dead system on the edge of former Dominion space, the Vindicator waited. It didn't run. Marcus Rhine didn't believe in running. Not from Earth, not from anyone. But he wasn't stupid either. The ship was being stripped of diplomatic protections. Earth Command was labeling him a terrorist. If the 9th caught him in open space, they'd swarm. He needed leverage, and he needed it fast. He found it in a place no one expected. Sithros, an old prison world used by the Dominion to hold Terran war criminals. That designation didn't mean anything real. War criminals just meant any human who fought back. Sithros was where they dumped soldiers who'd refused to kneel, and some of them were still alive. Marcus knew a name, one he hadn't said aloud in years. Corbin Nax. Once the most feared ground commander in the Terran Reclamation Corps, a man who razed 2 Dominion cities to stop a massacre, court-martialed, disavowed, and buried in Sithros because he saved civilians when Earth said to stand down. If Corbin was alive, he wasn't just a symbol. He was a spark. Landing on Sithros wasn't hard. The Dominion was dead. Its guards were gone, its surveillance net offline. But the prisons? Still locked, still operational, still buried under miles of reinforced stone. Marcus took a ground team. Miles. 2 engineers. A combat AI in a walking frame. They moved through the ash fields like ghosts, scanning for the right ID codes buried in broken terminals. They found him in cell block 9. He hadn't aged well. Long hair, deep scars, voice like gravel broken in half. But the fire in Corbin Nax's eyes hadn't dimmed. He looked up when Marcus opened the cell. "Rhine," he said. No question, just recognition. Took you long enough. Marcus handed him a rifle. I need you. Corbin grinned, teeth like old knives. About damn time. Back aboard the Vindicator, Corbin cleaned up, suited up, and started making plans before Marcus even asked. We have a narrow window, Corbin said, studying fleet movement maps. Davron's coming from Sol 12. He'll try to intercept in neutral space, away from public attention. Standard Earth protocol. No witnesses. Marcus folded his arms. And we beat him? How? We don't, Corbin replied. Not head-on. We remind the galaxy what Terran blood really costs. We hit Earth where they're most vulnerable. Miles raised a brow. You're talking about Earth itself? No, Corbin said, pointing to a blinking dot on the map. We hit Eidolon. Marcus stiffened. Eidolon was Earth's most secret shipyard, a classified facility buried in a nebula cloud. It was where they built the weapons Earth didn't want anyone to know about. Supercapacitor plasma cannons, stealth cruisers, orbital deterrents, illegal under every interstellar treaty Earth had ever signed. And it was unprotected, because no one even admitted it existed. You hit Eidolon, Corbin said, and suddenly Earth Command has bigger problems than one rogue ship. They have a leak. They have exposure. We don't need to win. We just need them to bleed. Marcus didn't like the plan. Not because it was risky, but because it was right. It forced Earth to feel what they'd made him feel. Not just pain. Not just betrayal. Humiliation. The jump to Eidolon was rough. The nebula interference fried every comm channel. Shields glitched. Sensors failed. It was like flying blind through a hurricane of static. But Grimm guided them through. The AI didn't speak much anymore. It had bonded with the ship too closely. It had absorbed too much of the death and vengeance flowing through its systems. But when Eidolon appeared on the screen, massive, hidden, monstrous, Grimm whispered one word. Target. The first volley wasn't a warning. It was a statement. 12 missiles. 2 direct hits on dry dock reactors. The shockwave shattered half the facility's cloaking systems, exposing the rest to deep space surveillance. Then the plasma lances followed. They carved through hulls like paper. Detonating internal fuel bays Earth thought were buried behind failsafes. Within minutes, Eidolon was a storm of fire and collapsing steel. But Earth wasn't silent. 2 defense cruisers, docked for refit, launched under emergency power. The Hammerlight and Justice reclaimed. Old ships, but strong. Corbin took the helm for the first volley. He hit Justice reclaimed with a double plasma arc, blowing the engine straight off the hull. The Hammerlight returned fire, raking the Vindicator's starboard with railgun bursts. Alarms screamed. Marcus held firm. Bring us around, broadside, all tubes. Grimm whispered through the intercom. Authorization required. Marcus didn't blink. Override code, Exodus. Authorization. Rhine Alpha 1. Confirmed, Grimm said. Unleashing hell. They fired. Everything. The blast tore the Hammerlight in half, the wreckage spinning through the nebula, trailing fire. By the time Earth Command responded, Eidolon was a smoking ruin. The galaxy saw everything, every hidden weapon, every treaty violation, every lie, and the Vindicator's signature on every single one. That's when Earth finally snapped. A system-wide warrant was issued. Not just for Marcus, for every crew member aboard. Treason, terrorism, war crimes. They offered pardons for anyone who turned him in. A bounty on his head. Miles read the notice on the bridge and spat on the floor. They want us to run. Marcus didn't speak. He was staring at the image of Eidolon, still burning in the distance. Corbin stepped up beside him. We're not soldiers anymore, Marcus. Marcus nodded. No. He turned to the crew. We're something else now. And every man and woman on that ship, every engineer, every gunner, every medic and veteran, stood behind him. No one left, not a single soul. The Vindicator vanished again. But the message didn't. Broadcasts flooded every system. Unedited footage of Eidolon. The names of every Dominion war criminal Earth had protected. The truth about Earth Command's war profiteering. The truth about Marcus Rhine. And one sentence, repeated in every language known to the stars. No empire survives a Terran warship. Not even its own. The first Terran cities to riot weren't the rich ones. They were the ones Earth Command forgot. Border colonies, burned-out mining towns, industrial districts buried in the fumes of failed expansion. Places where the names of fallen soldiers were carved into barroom walls because no one bothered to build monuments anymore. When the Vindicator's broadcast hit, when every working man, every ex-soldier, every civilian widow saw the secret shipyard burning, they didn't ask questions. They remembered. They remembered their sons who died on unannounced missions. They remembered the relief shipments that never came. They remembered Earth's silence. And now they had a name for the one man who spoke louder than it ever had. Marcus Rhine. Earth Command responded the way frightened tyrants always do. They doubled down. New security laws, new propaganda, a galaxy-wide declaration that Rhine had gone mad with power. They framed him as a terrorist, a butcher, a threat to stability. But even as their message echoed across every comm tower and satellite, something else spread faster. The footage of Eidolon. The screams of Earth officers abandoning their posts. The Terran flag burning in a classified dockyard while a black warship vanished into the shadows. No edits, no filters, no denials. The Vindicator had become a myth. But worse, it had become a symbol. And symbols are damn hard to kill. For 3 weeks, Earth hunted. Fleet Marshal Davrin sent ships into every sector Marcus had ever touched. The 9th Fleet was expanded to 50 warships. Bounties were raised. Civilian communications were monitored. Even private jump gates were sealed off. They tightened the noose. But Rhine wasn't trying to escape. He was preparing to strike. The Vindicator had vanished for exactly 21 days. And then, just before the end of the 4th Terran cycle, it reappeared, on Earth's doorstep. High orbit, cloaked, silent. They hadn't seen it coming. They hadn't imagined he would dare. But Rhine wasn't hiding. He was done sending messages. He was here to end it. Inside the warship, the atmosphere had changed. The bridge wasn't tense. It was calm. Focused. The kind of calm that only comes when there's no room left for fear. When everyone on board already accepted that they were either going to win or they were going to die loud enough that the galaxy never forgot them. Marcus Rhine stood at the front of the deck, arms behind his back, staring at the blue-white sphere of Earth as it slowly rotated below. His planet, his betrayal, his target. "Status?" he asked without looking. Grimm answered first. Its voice had grown colder over time. "Orbital defenses at 70% capacity. Primary Terran shield active. Fleet Marshal Davrin's command ship is in geostationary orbit over New Avalon." Miles stepped up beside Marcus, his voice low. "You really going to hit Earth itself?" Marcus nodded. Miles watched him. "Even if it makes you the villain forever?" Marcus turned toward him. "They already decided that. I'm just giving them a reason they can't forget." The plan was simple. Stupid even. They were going to punch straight through. No stealth, no trick shots, no false surrenders. Just the Vindicator dropping out of cloak and lighting up the sky like an angry god. Corbin Nax took charge of the armory. He loaded every warhead they had, including the ones Earth swore didn't exist. Planet crackers, EMP lances, decapitation-class fusion payloads. "This isn't a siege," he said to the crew. "This is a scalpel. We take out Davrin, we cut the head, then we broadcast the infection to every channel in the system." Marcus stood on the command deck, listening, watching his people. They weren't afraid. They were ready. The attack began at exactly 0400 Terran time. The Vindicator decloaked in low orbit, directly beneath the fleet's satellite defense net, and fired. Within seconds, orbital silos exploded like firecrackers. 3 of Earth's Sky Lances, a trillion-credit defense system, shattered under a targeted EMP burst. The sky over the Atlantic turned orange. The Ninth Fleet scrambled. Davrin's command ship, the Tyrant's Grace, rotated into firing position, launching interceptors. But it was too late. The Vindicator wasn't aiming at ships anymore. It was aiming at the Truth Engine. Officially, the Truth Engine didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the largest communications filter Earth had ever created, capable of rewriting entire data packets mid-transmission, auto-censoring whistleblowers, and generating approved narratives in real time. It sat inside the Terran Coreplex, buried under layers of fake infrastructure and a dozen corporate fronts. Marcus knew exactly where it was, and he had the codes. He'd taken them during the raid on Eidolon. As the Vindicator drifted over New Avalon, its underbelly cracked open. One missile, black, unmarked, launched silently. The Truth Engine never stood a chance. The explosion didn't just destroy the building, it freed the signal. For the first time in a century, Earth's citizens heard the truth, unedited, raw, and blinding. Every file Marcus had collected, every Dominion atrocity Earth had ignored, every death Earth had funded, every time Earth Command betrayed the colonies, all of it, uncensored, dumped across every screen on the planet. People froze in their homes. Cities paused. Soldiers lowered their rifles. There were no more lies. Not any more. Fleet Marshal Davrin panicked. He broke protocol. He ordered his ships to fire on Earth, to hit the Vindicator even if it meant orbital debris raining down on the cities below. He was desperate. Desperation makes mistakes. Davrin's flagship charged its orbital cannon. Marcus didn't wait. He locked on, fired a singularity warhead. The Tyrant's Grace folded inward, dragged into its own gravity, vanishing in a silent implosion. No explosion, just absence. Davrin was gone. And the Terran chain of command shattered. Back on Earth, chaos exploded. The riots turned into a revolution. Protesters stormed the Coreplex ruins. Civilians surrounded Terran military bases, demanding answers. Some generals surrendered. Others tried to flee. But nowhere was safe now. The lie had collapsed. And above them, the Vindicator hung in the sky like judgment itself. Marcus stood on the observation deck, watching it unfold. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just watched Earth burn, not in fire, but in truth. Miles approached, silent. "You think this fixes anything?" he asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No." "Then why?" Marcus turned, eyes hollow. "Because now they'll remember what happens when you try to silence men like me." He gave the order. Not to attack, but to leave. They didn't land. They didn't negotiate. They didn't demand anything. They'd already won. Not because Earth fell, but because Earth could never pretend again. As the Vindicator pulled away from orbit, civilians looked up. Some in rage, some in awe, some in silence. And for the first time in history, humanity didn't see a flag or a general or a president as its symbol. They saw a man in a black warship who wouldn't bend, wouldn't break, and wouldn't shut up when they told him to. In the weeks that followed, Earth's government fractured. New systems rose, decentralized, brutal, honest. The colonies took control of their own worlds. Supply lines reopened. Veterans returned, not in chains, but in command chairs. Some wanted Marcus to return, to lead, to rule, but he never did. He disappeared, just like that. No signal, no beacon, no speech. One night the Vindicator jumped into deep space and didn't come back, but the legend stayed. Every planet told the story a little different. Some said Marcus Rhine was still out there, waiting for the next empire to forget what happened. Others said he was dead, buried under stars and wreckage, his mission complete. But all of them agreed on one thing. That warship, that man, that warning, burned into the bones of history. No empire survives a Terran warship. And now they understand why. 6 months after Earth fell silent, the galaxy was louder than ever. The old empires had collapsed or crumbled. Earth's grip had been severed like a snapped tendon. Messy, bloody, painful. The colonies were free. The surviving Dominion territories were being carved up by warlords, rebel coalitions, exiled species. Dozens of new governments rose out of the ash, each one promising they were different. But most of them weren't. Some were worse. With Earth distracted and the Dominion dead, the predators came crawling out. Mercenary syndicates, slaver guilds, tech cartels selling Dominion weapons to the highest bidder. And worse, rogue Terran admirals who saw an opportunity to build their own empires with whatever loyal pieces they could steal from the corpse of the Ninth Fleet. The war wasn't over. It had evolved. And in that chaos, rumors started again. About the warship. About the man who killed an empire. About Marcus Rhine. Most thought he was dead. Others said he was hiding in the outer rings, burned out, broken, waiting for death to catch up. But they were all wrong. Marcus wasn't dead. He was watching. The Vindicator hadn't disappeared. It had gone dark, no signal, no jumps, no engagements, just silent drift through unclaimed space on the edge of the abandoned Icaron belt. A graveyard of shattered moons, collapsed outposts, and ships that never made it back. Inside, the lights were dim. The crew was thinner now. Many had gone their own way after Earth fell. Some went home. Some found other wars to fight. Marcus had let them go without a word. Only a handful remained. Miles, Corbin, Grimm, and Marcus himself. He spent his time alone now, down in the lower decks, in a room that used to be the war room. Now it was a tomb. He stared at old files, old logs. He listened to transmissions across the fractured galaxy. He heard the voices of new monsters. But he didn't move. Not yet. Because even he didn't know who he was anymore. "Commander," Grimm's voice crackled one night, low and mechanical. Marcus didn't look up from the holographic map. He hadn't slept in 2 days. "What?" "We've picked up distress signals from the former Aurelian zone. Colony Arc 7. It's under siege." "By who?" Grimm's voice paused, a beat of static. "By us." That got Marcus to look up. "Explain." Grimm shifted its tone, like it regretted even bringing it up. 2 Terran warships bearing Earth military design, but not registered, have initiated orbital bombardments. They're using old Dominion protocols, tactical erasure, civilians included. Miles entered a second later, face pale. "It's Admiral Vask." Marcus stood up slowly. He remembered Vask, a career Terran officer. Cold, efficient, arrogant, believed diplomacy was weakness, mercy was treason, and power was the only truth. Earth Command had quietly relieved him of duty after Rhine's strike on Eidolon, but they didn't jail him. They didn't strip his fleet. They just looked away. Now he had 2 warships, 4 battalions, and a god complex. And he was using the Terran name to build something worse than the old empire. Marcus stared at the blinking red dot on the screen. He didn't blink. "Prep the engines," he said. Miles stepped forward. "You sure?" Marcus's voice was cold. I didn't tear the old world down just to let some bastard build a new one on its bones. The Vindicator launched without ceremony. No speeches, no declarations. Just a jump straight to the Aurelian zone, deep into the fire. It arrived in the middle of a massacre. The colony's sky was already red. Admiral Vask's 2 warships, the Crucible and the Torchbearer, hovered like executioners over the cities below. Every 3 minutes, one of them would fire, a targeted plasma lance, precise enough to collapse buildings without damaging infrastructure. Civilian targets, hospitals, schools, terror made efficient. The rebel coalition below had already broken. And then the Vindicator appeared. Just like that. Unannounced, uninvited, unforgiving. The Crucible was the first to respond. It spun, activated its forward weapons, and transmitted a demand for identification. Marcus didn't answer. He fired instead. One shot, hull-piercing, singularity-laced. It hit the Crucible's bridge like a meteor. It didn't explode, it just vanished, folded in on itself, then spat out in burning chunks across the battlefield. The Torchbearer panicked, tried to run, didn't make it. Grim tracked its trajectory and deployed an AI-guided kill shot. 5 seconds later, it was debris. On the ground, the people didn't cheer. They stared. They'd heard the stories. Of the ship, the man, the war, and now here he was. Real. Alive. Ryan opened a comm channel. No encryption, no delay, to every planet in the zone. This is Marcus Ryan, he said, voice low and rough. If you fight for power, if you claim flags over corpses, if you rule by fear, I'm coming for you. He cut the signal. That was the spark. Within days, 3 rogue admirals vanished. Within weeks, slaver caravans began self-destructing their nav beacons. Within months, the broken systems whispered a name they hadn't dared say in a long time. Justice. But Marcus wasn't fighting to fix the galaxy. He was fighting because it had promised to be better, and then betrayed that promise. Back aboard the ship, things weren't simple. Miles watched Marcus from a distance, watched the old fire return, but saw what it was burning down to get there. You're not going to stop, are you? He asked one night, as they cruised through the wreckage of another would-be warlord's base. Marcus didn't answer at first. Then, no. Even if it kills you? Marcus looked at the stars. I'm already dead to them. Corbin sat nearby, cleaning his weapon. He grunted. No, you're not. That's the problem. You're still alive, still fighting, and you scare the hell out of them. Marcus turned. Corbin continued. Every time you show up, the cowards run, the tyrants shake, even the heroes get nervous. Because you remind them that blood bought this peace, yours, and they never wanted to pay you back. Marcus stared at him, and for once, there was no anger in his eyes, just exhaustion. Grimm's voice cut through the silence. New target detected. Marcus turned. Where? Earth. He blinked. What? Grimm's tone dropped. Earth's new provisional government is preparing to announce its reintegration of surviving rogue admirals. Full pardons, full reinstatement, including Vask's successors, in exchange for loyalty. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Then he whispered, So that's it. They're going to rebuild the same machine. Corbin stood slowly. You want to stop it? Marcus turned to his crew. No, he said. I want to burn it down again. The closer the Vindicator came to Earth, the more the stars looked like tombstones, silent, watching, remembering. 6 months had passed since Marcus Ryan brought the old empire to its knees. 6 months since he dropped the truth engine into rubble and shattered the illusion of control. 6 months since Fleet Marshal Davrin's flagship folded into itself like a dying god. And in those 6 months, Earth promised reform, promised peace, promised to be better. But now, it was doing exactly what every empire eventually did, rebuilding the same machine under a different name. Only this time, the gears were greased with the blood of men like Rhine. And worse, they were welcoming back the very monsters he had burned out of the stars. They called it Unity Day. A public broadcast was scheduled, a new Terran council to be sworn in. Full military honors restored to surviving admirals. Pardons issued, forgiveness for traitors, for butchers, and in the middle of it all, a new flag, blue, white, and hollow, as if paint could erase memory. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, hands behind his back, staring at the pale blue dot on the screen. He hadn't spoken since the transmission came in. His crew didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They'd followed him through fire, betrayal, and silence. They knew what it meant when Earth tried to pretend history was behind them. It wasn't. And Rhine was the man history refused to bury. "Fleet status?" he asked quietly. Grimm's voice came low and clear. "Earth has reactivated planetary defense grid. 7 orbital batteries online, 2 mid-atmosphere cruisers, 1 destroyer in low orbit, acting as security for the Council Summit. Name? Eden's Wrath." Rhine knew that ship. It was one of the first to refuse his orders when he'd gone rogue, one of the last to pull out before he struck Eidolon, commanded by a man who called him unstable, who watched from orbit while the colonies burned. Miles stepped forward from the rear console. "You're going after the summit, aren't you?" Marcus nodded. "We warned them once, then we warned them again. This isn't about vengeance anymore. It's about making sure they don't forget what silence costs." Corbin sat in a corner, reloading mags. "You want them dead?" "No," Marcus said flatly. "I want them seen, not as leaders, as liars, as men who build their future on the bones of their mistakes." "And after?" Miles asked. Marcus turned. "We burn the flag." The approach was surgical. No declaration of war, no open broadcast, just a slow descent through Earth's high orbit under a cloaked field so thin it breathed against the exosphere. The Vindicator hovered just above the designated peace zone of the Council Summit, New Avalon, now renamed Unity Spire. The building was a jagged monument of glass and steel shaped like a broken spear. Symbolism, they claimed. A reminder that Earth had overcome division. It looked more like denial to Marcus. Inside that structure, 17 council members gathered. 5 were ex-admirals, 2 were former corporate warlords. 1 had personally approved the containment of 3 colony revolts. Now they sat under the banner of unity, preparing to speak to the galaxy about peace. Marcus walked to the war room, slammed his palm on the override panel, and opened the ground assault vault. "Breach team, with me." They didn't bring tanks. They didn't bring armies. They brought proof. Grimm hijacked every satellite in Earth's comnet within seconds. Every screen, every data pad, every news feed. The broadcast began with silence. Then Marcus's face filled the sky. No preamble, no dramatics, just him. Older, scarred, calm. "My name is Marcus Rhine. Some call me a terrorist, some call me a traitor, and some of you remember me as the man who burned your empire to the ground. You called it peace, but you rebuilt it with the same lies, the same hands, the same silence. I came here to make sure the future knows. There are consequences for forgetting the cost of blood." The feed cut to a live view of the Vindicator, hovering directly over Unity Spire, its weapons systems unfolding like the wings of death. "Council members, your summit is over. Surrender your titles, or I will do what I should have done 6 months ago." Inside Unity Spire, the council descended into chaos. Security scrambled. Panic set in. Evac shuttles were prepped, but they wouldn't matter. The Vindicator had already shut down every exit route, jammed every signal, grounded every ship. This wasn't an attack. It was a reckoning. Marcus hit the ground with his team in a tactical drop, bypassing external security with a controlled freefall through the spire's upper venting systems. They hit the 50th floor running. No one stood in their way. Terran security had heard the stories. They laid down their weapons and got out of the way. Room by room, Marcus moved forward. Not shooting, not screaming, just walking. His boots echoed through marble halls like the final drumbeat before a trial. Corbin cleared the stairwell. Miles took the rear, holding the evac corridor, and Marcus entered the council chamber alone. They didn't rise. They didn't speak. They just stared. The man they erased was standing in front of them in full armor, eyes dead and steady, warship looming above like a judgment. Counselor Karen, the mouthpiece, was the first to open her mouth. "This is madness." Marcus didn't blink. "No, this is memory." He tossed a small object onto the table, a single data core, encrypted. Inside it, every document Earth had sealed after Eidolon, every file on the child experiments, the hidden Dominion trades, the Earth-licensed slaver routes. It lit up in front of them, unedited, undeniable. "Broadcast it," Marcus said. No one moved. So Grimm did it for them. The whole feed, everything, went live. In less than 10 seconds, Earth watched its new government unravel in real time. The screams weren't from pain. They were from truth. Some council members collapsed, others begged. Karen stood with shaky hands and tried to compose herself. "You won't be forgiven for this." Marcus stepped closer. "I'm not asking." He raised a small torch and ignited the Unity banner hanging above their heads. The cloth burned fast, blue to black, white to ash, the last symbol of Earth's lie, gone in less than 30 seconds. Then Marcus turned and walked out. Didn't kill a soul. Didn't need to. The truth was louder than bullets. The Vindicator rose over the city again. One last message. There will be no second empire, no silent rebuild. If you try, if you even think about it, I'll come back. Not with a warning, not with a broadcast, with fire. This was your last chance to be better. And then he left. No ship chased him. No missiles tracked him. No politician dared speak his name that night. Because now they understood. They all did. Marcus Rhine wasn't the past. He was the line, the one you crossed when you thought you could erase what you did. And the Vindicator was the knife that made sure the scar stayed visible forever. There were no parades, no medals, no memorial stones, only silence. The kind of silence that stretches across systems, across years, across lives. Too heavy to lift and too honest to ignore. Marcus Rhine had ended the war. Not just the Dominion's war. Not just Earth Command's quiet tyranny, but the pattern, the cycle that every empire built, fed, and eventually collapsed under. He hadn't won. He had simply made it impossible for them to lie anymore. And then he vanished. The Vindicator slipped away from Earth orbit the night of the final broadcast. It didn't jump. It drifted, like a graveyard ship, like the last heartbeat of a dying star. No one followed. They could have. Earth still had fleets. The colonies had scavenged enough weapons to level half a sector. There were bounty hunters, warlords, scavengers who would have sold their soul to take down the man who brought the galaxy to its knees. But they didn't. Because they knew. He didn't need to survive to win. He just needed to never stop coming back. And now that he'd burned the house down, he didn't care if it took him with it. He didn't speak much anymore. Not even to Miles, not even to Corbin. Most of the crew had moved on. Rhine had given them a choice, and they'd taken it. found planets to settle on, broken systems to help rebuild. Some joined new governments, some faded into anonymity. All of them were marked. No one who'd served aboard the Vindicator would ever be forgotten. Not by the people they saved, not by the people they ruined, not by the people who still feared them. Only 3 remained on the ship: Marcus Rhine, Miles, and Grimm. They drifted far past the edge of any known chart, beyond trade routes, beyond jump lanes, into the kind of space where ships weren't supposed to go, blacker than death, older than memory. Marcus sat in the observation chamber most days, alone. Sometimes staring at the stars, sometimes not moving at all. The galaxy was watching itself now, reshaping, voting, fighting in smaller, pettier ways, but without the shadows of empires looming over them. He had done what he set out to do. So why didn't it feel like peace? "You thinking about dying out here?" Miles asked one morning, arms crossed, voice flat. Marcus didn't look away from the stars. "No." "Then what are we doing?" "Listening." Miles frowned. "To what?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "To see if they're really better, or just quieter." Miles didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Corbin was the first to go. He left a note on the console. Nothing poetic, just coordinates to a prison moon in the Kalis Drift that was still running black ops experiments on prisoners. Said he had work to do. Marcus didn't try to stop him, didn't say goodbye. Some men only know how to live with fire at their back. 1 week later, Miles came to Marcus's quarters. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Miles leaned forward. "I've got a comm from Crixus Prime," he said. "They're forming a coalition council, neutral, no homeworld dominance. They're asking for help building a code of rights, something permanent." Marcus didn't respond. "They want you to be part of it," Miles added. "An advisor, no politics, just structure, just honesty." Marcus finally looked up. "They want a war criminal to write their laws?" "They want someone who remembers what betrayal looks like." It wasn't anger that kept Marcus silent. It was grief. Not for himself, but for everything he'd had to kill to get here. 3 days later, he stood at the helm of the Vindicator for the last time. Miles helped him load up a small cruiser. Bare bones, no weapons, just enough engines and life support to reach the nearest trade line. Marcus stared at the ship like a man looking at his own reflection for the first time. "You sure about this?" Miles asked. Marcus nodded. "The war's not over," he said. "But I don't belong in the next one." Miles raised a brow. "Where do you belong?" Marcus gave a rare, broken smile. "I think I need to learn how to live in a world I didn't have to fight for." He left the Vindicator that night. Alone, no coordinates, no plan. Just a man finally untethered from the thing that defined him. And the warship that followed him through hell? It stayed behind. Grimm never spoke again after Marcus left. Not to Miles, not to anyone. Some say the AI burned itself out. Others say it waits, silent, slumbering, like a sword buried in stone. And the Vindicator still drifts out there, somewhere. Some claim it guards forgotten sectors. Others say it only wakes when it hears the sound of tyranny starting again. A few believe it's watching Earth, just in case. But one thing is certain. No one, not rebels, not empires, not kings, wants to see that black silhouette in their sky again. Because now the galaxy knows you can kill a man, you can bury the truth, you can rebuild your lies, but you can't erase what it cost to buy your peace, and you can't outrun a Terran warship. Years passed. The galaxy changed. New flags, new maps, new problems. But in the darkest corners, in the places where power still whispered behind locked doors, there was always one story. Told in broken voices, in hushed bars, in smuggler hideouts, in council meetings when someone proposed doing something just this once. They'd pause, and someone would say, "Careful, he might come back." And though no one saw him again, somewhere in the silence between stars, Marcus Rhine smiled.